Over the past few days, we've seen the news from Region 6, and we have come to expect nationally that the PNC and AFC would behave in a particular manner when in office at different levels. And so it was not surprising to me that that behavior manifested itself once again in the town council in New Amsterdam. We saw in Region 5, in the entire period that APNU was in office, because of bullyism by the PNC councillors in that region and the REO who was appointed there, that the council hardly met. Although we won that region, every session of the RDC experienced vile, disruptive behavior on the part of APNU AFC. So much so that they could not pursue their mandate. And we've seen this in Linden, in the town council and the RDC there. First of all, to sabotage government projects, to misrepresent them, and to stifle dissenting voices. We've seen them attempt to throw the town clerk out because he dared to question the lack of accountability on the part of the council in Linden, the town council in Linden. At the national level, we've experienced the same with APNU AFC. The refusal to abide by laws, the Constitution. We saw even in the Parliament they refused to respect a clear provision of the Constitution which dealt with no confidence motions. And therefore, what I saw in New Amsterdam was bound to happen at some point in time. I think they're very disturbed, that is APNU AFC, at what is happening in that town. Now, they have 14 councillors there, and in 2016 local government elections, we had 2 and APNU had 12. In the last local government elections, we got 6 councillors and APNU got 8. And we came near to winning another constituency by a few votes. Had we done that, the town council would have tied. Now New Amsterdam is seen as a traditional stronghold of the PNC and AFC. And to have those results shocked them. And since then, our councillors, the 6 councillors, have been working very hard to ensure that people's voices reach the meetings of the town council. They've been working very hard to engage with people and to address their concerns in the communities. They've been engaging the residents of New Amsterdam on the massive programs, central government programs that are being rolled out within New Amsterdam and the rest of Berbice. If you go to New Amsterdam, you would see a virtual transformation of the town in terms of road building, etc., community road building. And next week, the Berbice would see another maybe 300 roads being awarded Region 4, Region 3, Region 4, 5, and 6 would see their road works for 2024 being awarded. They're a bit delayed, but the residents would see that in those 3 regions. So these councillors have been doing extraordinary work, and it frightens APNU and AFC. And I have no doubt that the minions in the council there have been given instructions from the center, from the APNU AFC leadership to try to muzzle our councillors. And one way of doing this is to fabricate an issue and then suspend the councillors. This will not stand. We'll not allow it to happen. But in doing so, they have revealed the true nature of APNU AFC. They can't change. Their whole approach is to stifle dissenting voices and to bully people into submission. And we will not allow this to continue. The APNU AFC has always had a problem, it seems, though, in Berbice. They're anti-development nationally, and where you can see manifestations of this, that they're opposed to almost projects all across the country. Anywhere that projects are done for the good of people, they try to sabotage those projects. But they have a particular hatred for Berbice. I don't know why. Maybe because it historically is a PPP stronghold, but they've always opposed anything good for Berbice. They were opposed to the University of Guyana branch in Berbice. I remember in Parliament they stood up and opposed it. They did not want the university to go to Berbice. They were opposed to the bridge across the Berbice River. They were opposed to recently the stadium at Palmyra. They were opposed to the 4-lane road we're building in Berbice. They were opposed to, in fact, their opposition to Berbice manifested itself again in the termination, the closure of 2 sugar estates in Region 6 and the sending home of large numbers of workers. So this is a typical APNU AFC kind of approach. They will try to kill any project in these areas. They can't be opposed to some things like the new hospital in New Amsterdam, because open opposition to that would cause people to be upset with them. So what they claim is that we're spending too much money now nationally on building infrastructure. But it's a veiled opposition to the development in New Amsterdam. The hospital that we're building in New Amsterdam is going to be about $160 million US, would serve the people in New Amsterdam and the people in Berbice generally. It's a European standard hospital, a modern hospital with some of the, well, would allow us, the facilities would allow us to develop healthcare at an international level for the people in Berbice. We plan to take the old hospital, rehabilitate, refurbish it, upgrade it to make it the mental health facility. And it will also not leave New Amsterdam. We're currently in New Amsterdam spending over $800 million on building an international track with FIFA standard lights and a FIFA standard ground. And that's under construction now. So things that they did not do in New Amsterdam, people are experiencing now. But they will go again to New Amsterdam when the campaign starts. Like I saw AFC at the Bottom House meetings recently. They went to, I think, Liverpool, and they were blowing the racism dog whistle again. Oh, the PPP does not like Afro-Guyanese people. They're neglecting their communities. But they would not say that New Amsterdam is being transformed under the PPP. The facilities alone, these facilities would have never happened under APNU. And the same thing is happening in Linden. But they will find a way to explain away the development there by comparing it with somewhere else and using false metrics in the comparisons. So this is typical PNC behavior. They just outside of New Amsterdam too, apart from that track, 1 minute drive away from New Amsterdam, at Palmyra, you're going to have an international stadium, cricket stadium. They were opposed to that, as I said before. And you're going to have an international hotel. You're going to have several shopping malls, etc. 1 minute drive out of the town. And all of these developments, they're very unhappy about. They have no alternative. If you ask APNU, what do you plan? They're so vague what they should do at the national level, much less if you get them in a corner and ask them about sectoral plans or plans for geographic areas in our countries, the region. They will be even vaguer. Because they don't have national plans. We can tell you what the plans are, what the projects are to develop the economies of our the different regions of our country, because they all have different levels of development, and we're trying to bring development that people may enjoy in the more central parts of our country to the outlying areas, Linden, Hinterland, Berbice, etc. So we have a dedicated plan to do that. They don't have anything, but they're opposed to everything that we have done. You've seen their comments about the sugar workers recently. And by the way, last week after I spoke about the sugar industry and the devastation after they tried to misrepresent what took place, they argued that it's only 5,000 people were laid off, not 7,000. I pointed out that it's more like 15,000 people who were laid off if you take account of the private cane farmers and their workers. But I didn't even deal with the indirect numbers of people that it affected. Because if you're saying 3 persons in a family, that's 45,000 people who were affected. And then people call me with some horror stories about what they were told and their arrogance, and when they went into the ministry, the wanton discrimination that they faced. So that was just after my press conference last week. So we've seen what's taking place in New Amsterdam must not be seen as a single incident in isolation. It is indicative of the behavior of APNU AFC, and they have not changed. They will never change. So in spite of the new promises being made, or the promises to respect democracy and everything else, they have not changed. last week, I just want to point out a few things because it's becoming like I don't want to, I keep using the word circus, but I can't find another word to describe this. For a serious party every week to put out press releases or go to press conferences and spout a lot of nonsense. And then we have to come back the following week and respond to the nonsense. It's becoming a little, not just tiring, but I think it's like, I have better things to do. But I'm very much aware that some of the unsuspecting people may actually believe these things. So the APNU, at the last, they issue a press release, I think they canceled their press conference and issued a press release. And they said the GTE is the brainchild. They want to repeat that the GTE is the brainchild of the coalition government, despite the attempts by Bharrat Jagdeo to steal the idea as his own. That's a direct quotation. So, are you supportive of this project or you're not? And one time we hear them, Patterson saying from the other side of the circus, that this project will fail. It will be a white elephant project. It will never deliver the 50% reduction in electricity costs. That's the consumers. That was just last week's press conference. And then on the other hand, APNU, after initially being opposed to the project, but realizing now that the project is nearing completion and will come on stream next year and will deliver the enhanced power at a lower rate next year and a lower cost too next year to people, they now are claiming the project once again. But just imagine this. If this was their brainchild, what did they do about it? So what is so special about the idea of bringing gas to generate power? What is so special about the idea? Now, this is done routinely around the world. This is not a special idea that Jagdeo has or a party could claim credit for. If you have to take credit for a generic idea, an idea that is practiced around the world routinely, where people recognize that gas is a less polluting fuel than bunker C and diesel. Secondly, gas comes in cheaper, would allow you to generate power cheaper. And if you have your own gas, it's better to use it to generate power than to import fossil fuel. What's peculiar, what's special about this idea? Nothing. It's common sense. For you to claim that you had a great idea here, when the entire world is doing this, we're not doing anything unusual. What we are doing, we're moving forward with what the world has done because we have a need for it and it will bring a benefit to our people. That is what we are doing. They are so brain dead, in fact, so devoid of ideas of any substance, that you have to claim a generic idea that people routinely practice around the world by using their own gas to generate power as something special that you should be given credit for. The reason we claim credit for it, because we took what was a generic idea and we said, hold on a minute, in spite of the negatives from the opposition, in spite of the naysayers, we are going to do this. Personally, I had with the task force, I had nearly 80, maybe over 80 meetings of my time as vice president with a task force that is made up of our local people and Exxon people to get this project to one stage, which was just to the tendering. That was meetings before we even launched a tender. We put in the effort to do it as a country and as a government. That is what they didn't do. They couldn't have done it because they are busy hustling. Patu and the others were busy hustling around the place. They were not interested in projects or generating power. They were busy hustling, as we saw, and I can speak about later. They were not interested in that. They were interested in buying a generator that the minister had to go and see himself. I think in Germany, he had to fly and go and see the generator as though he's a technical person, an engineer. They bought one small generator, I think, for Essequibo Coast, and I think he had to go himself to see it. Nothing of a long-term nature. Nothing, absolutely nothing. That's what it took to get there. We had to then get the designs done. We had to get the contract in place. We had to hire supervision firm. We had to get additional contracts in place, not just the pipeline, the power plant, the NGL facility, but also we had to go and then design and award the transmission main, the control center. That's what it took to get to this project. So they're claiming the idea, which is, oh, Jagdeo steal our idea, but they were opposed to it. When this is a general thing, even a donkey would know that if you have your own gas, you have to use it to generate power. Anybody would know that, and they claim that. This is what it is. So they then move on in the same press release and said, oh, the PPP doesn't like the farmers too much. They've moved away from doing a fertilizer plant to now going to phase 2 of the power plant because, you know, last week I explained that the demand has grown so rapidly that by the time that project comes on stream, we would still need another maybe 200, 300 megawatts of power. Because if we incorporate the private sector demand that will come online because of lower cost, and we look at the growth in demand on the national grid, then already all the power would be used up. And so we need to plan for the next phase. So I explained that, but considering that 50 million cubic feet of gas per day would be used to generate about 300 megawatts of power. Less than that, not all 50 million, maybe about 43 million cubic feet per day. We could, and we have another power plant of a comparable nature. We probably use about 80, maybe 80 million cubic feet per day of gas to generate nearly 600 megawatts of power over there. We still have another 40 million cubic feet of gas per day because the pipeline is sized to bring in about 120 million cubic feet per day. So to do a fertilizer plant and other facilities, but they don't think about that. So they suddenly love the farmers, that the PPP doesn't like farmers anymore. A couple of weeks ago, they were saying, Winston Jordan, that the $1 billion in fertilizer subsidy that we gave to the farmers was racism. 2-3 weeks ago, they said that. And I had cause to point out that we're spending $6 billion on electricity subsidy for Region 10. That they see everything through racist eyes. So just 2-3 weeks ago, they were saying the fertilizer plant, the subsidy we gave to the farmers was racism. We're giving it to Indian people. Now, 3 weeks later, they love the farmers so much. But it was the same Granger who said that rice farming and agriculture is private business. He was saying that. They forget these things. So they see an opportunity to talk nonsense, you know. They just see something, oh, so if they use some of the gas now to generate more power, which is needed in the country, so we can avoid long blackout, we can improve the quality of life of our people, and, you know, and get cheaper power to them, that they would not go with the fertilizer plant. It's not so. That's why I speak about the planning again. So a utterly nonsensical press release issued last week from APNU. Pure, unadulterated nonsense, garbage. And that comes off the press from a serious, or a so-called serious political party that claims that it represents the people of this country. Now, the leader of that party went to Toronto and claimed that Jagdeo want to provoke his opponents to resort to street protests, and that the PPP pays young Afro-Guyanese to beat up Indo-Guyanese at these protests and then blame the PNC and AFC. This, can you imagine? And they talk about bringing people together. First of all, he doesn't have any respect for young Afro-Guyanese men. They talk about this. They would prefer if we do nothing to assist Afro-Guyanese in the country. They will be the happiest group of people. They don't want education to people to get scholarships, or these young people to be trained or taught positively. You can own something, own a plot of land, and own a car, and get a good paying job. The messages that we've been preaching all the time. Their message to young people, especially young Afro-Guyanese, especially young Afro-Guyanese men, is you're victims. You're victims of this racist government. So now he says we pay them, that they're opportunistic, we pay them to beat up Indo-Guyanese people. And then we claim it's the PNC doing it and AFC doing it. This is the sort of nonsense that we get in this day and age. And then they said they're trying to bring people together. You don't hear us saying this sort of thing. One time at Babujan, I said that on the morning of the election, they went to some of the villages that I know because I have friends from those villages who are Afro-Guyanese, and they beat some of the drum and said, let's get up and throw these Kuli people out. And I said, if that happens in the PPP, anyone says that, we'll kick them out. Now, Christopher Ram filed a private criminal charge against me. I was condemning racism. I was saying, if anybody does that in the PPP, we'll kick them out of the party. And he filed a case, but he left out the part where I said, if that happens in the PPP, we'll kick them out. Anybody says this practices racism. And it was true, and they did it. And so it's not so far-fetched to believe that when you hear openly the leader of a political party openly in Toronto saying, we were beating up, we're paying young Afro-Guyanese to beat up Indian people so we can claim they did it. Is it so far-fetched? Why doesn't Christopher Ram file private criminal charges against him? That was the nonsense that we have had to go through. Misrepresentation all the time of the PPP and what we stand for. We're the only party that has made a genuine attempt to involve people of every race, every religion. And it's happening every single day. Even when we're in office or out of office, when we have maintained that position, that we work for all Guyana and for people of every race. So who is stoking racial tensions in this country? Who is it? Who is doing the ethnic count every time? It's APNU and the AFC. Look at the divisive tone that they took in some of the Amerindian communities, the AFC. And I was pleased to hear that some of the people asked them, they were very uncomfortable when the AFC did its fact-finding pit latrine tour of the hinterland. And some of the Tushos asked them some very uncomfortable questions, and they hurriedly left the villages because people see through the shallowness of the touring parties and their opportunism, that they're opportunistic. But they try to peddle again the race message. Oh, the PPP is discriminating against Amerindians now. So, and I saw, even when I look at it, even Hamilton Green, the elder, I saw he wrote something in the papers and a letter. And I say to myself, when Hamilton Green could openly write a letter in the newspapers and people can openly read his letter, then democracy is alive and well in this country. If you check Hamilton Green's past, you will find every thing that is wrong about governance, and you may find quite a few things, and I'm being very diplomatic here, that are unlawful and illegal in that past. And that's being very, very mild. He was one of the most divisive characters in our history. This gentleman is unrepentant. Up until recently, he chastised the PNC for giving up, allowing free and fair elections in 1992, and saying they should have continued to rig to stay in power. They made a blunder also in 2020. They didn't rig in a sophisticated enough manner. And the period where his sophisticated rigging was done was the period when they would shoot people, use the army, shoot some of our activists, kill them, seize the ballot boxes and take them to a central point and then just change the votes. That was the sophistication that he practiced, the Reagan practices of the Hamilton Green. So I'm so happy that he could find his voice now to talk about governance and what's taking place here. He'd find that the PPP has never stolen an election and that we respect the Constitution and the separation of power and a free media. You'll find out who used to beat up, who used to lead the gangs beating up people, and who organized the killing of people like Father Dark and the others in this country. It was members of the PNC in the period when Hamilton Green was the Prime Minister. The period that Walter Rodney was assassinated. One of the top scholars in the world was assassinated, his life snuffed out, because he dared to speak up against the dictatorship. It was a period when Hamilton Green was the Prime Minister. And why do you think they rewarded him with a special pension as soon as they got in? They passed a special law to give him a special pension. He enjoys it now. We could have taken it back away from him. He enjoys it because sometimes the PPP is too forgiving. Sometimes it's too forgiving, and the same people that you ignore for the sake of national development, they come reborn again to present themselves as images and paragons of virtue, like we've seen from the AFC now. Some of the biggest thieves and hustlers, every week they go to the press conference and talk about probity and national development. Nigel Lewis has been carrying the same line. Oh, the PPP is a commercial enterprise, and basically Indo-Guyanese alone been getting contracts. And guess what he uses to illustrate that? He asked, in an interview, he asked how many non-Indians got blocks of offshore in the period under the PPP. So he ignored the fact that they signed the most atrocious agreement. His party, which held the position of Minister of Natural Resources, and he was on the other side with ExxonMobil when the worst agreement that we now are trying to eke out additional benefits from was signed. He ignored the fact that they didn't give a single Afro-Guyanese any block in the 5 years, but says he also ignores the fact that the blocks were given out on the basis of who applied for them, because that was the basis under which blocks were awarded in the past. First come, first serve. That they also continued, that now we're going to auction. He ignored the fact that we promised that we'll discontinue that practice and go to auction. And that in the auction, the only Guyanese who have this, or got the award of blocks, were group of progressive Afro-Guyanese, but we didn't see them as Afro-Guyanese. We saw them as Guyanese. I didn't care whatever color they were, or whatever race. These are Guyanese, and we're happy that they bid. Ignored all of that, but continue with this old rhetoric, intent to mislead people. And then ask, who owns different things in the country. Ask Nigel Lewis and the PNC that he supported in 1992 what people owned in Guyana, of any race, and then you would understand this issue. So at the same press conference, Cathy Hughes and all of the others, they doubled down on this lie. They lied that in the coalition period, they did all these hubs, etc., which is a total lie. And so what they did, they presented from the GA the plan. They said, look, we did it because there was a plan that we started in 2014. If you talk, and I hope that you will speak with the Prime Minister and his staff, Mr. Harsewak, who heads that unit, you will see that all the hubs that are done in the hinterland and the now installation of internet in these hubs were built under the PPP. I don't know where they put these hubs that they're talking about, where they put the hubs, but they acknowledge that the computers for the hubs were bought and were in the office of the president. And guess where did the computers go? Where did the computers? You Google it, and first they said they will give people from Cyril Potter College. Go and check that period. In the 2015-2016 period, they said they will give the teachers, but eventually they did not give the teachers. They gave it to party activists. The thousands of computers we had bought to put in the hubs, first of all. They were under the office of the president. They disappeared those computers. So they can't revise the history. They talk about, oh, we signed this agreement with the head of UNDP. Of course you signed the agreement. That's why, because it was the GRIF project that we left that was managed through UNDP. And they spent several millions of US dollars from that project without achieving the objective. It's our project. We left the money. UNDP was the implementing agency. They took the computers that we bought and disappeared the computers to the hubs. And you talk to the Prime Minister and Harsewak, and they would tell you about each of the hubs we've done. And the Amerindian communities, the people out there know what is nonsense and what sense. The thing they're talking about is they paid a ton of money, maybe through a corrupt transaction, and put in some low-band internet in a few places. That's not a hub. That's not a hub. The hub was supposed to have 20 computers in a building with internet access that will teach a familiarization program with computers and then be access to the internet, give access to the internet. So that kids who don't have the internet in the schools or in maybe the health center, in those communities that are generally small, they can all go to the hub and utilize the hub. They can study from the single hub, because we could not put a computer in every home. And that was, we had started with the one laptop per family on the coast to get more people to get computers on the coast, but we couldn't do the same for the Amerindian communities because they didn't have individual access to electricity. We had only given them the solar panels that they were using to just put basic lights in the community. We have upgraded this now again since we got back to office, and they have a solar panel now with a little higher capacity, but they couldn't run computers individually. And you didn't have internet access in these communities. So to go to each home. So that was how we came up with the concept of the hub. One place in every village with about 20, 25, 30 computers where the entire village can come and utilize the kids from the school through rotation systems, and people in the evening can use it for the conduct of business. That's the hub we're talking about. Not Cathy use through going and turn on an internet that you can't even download a basic PDF file from. They just don't understand these things. They talk a lot, it sounds good, but they don't understand the origin of these projects, how they were financed. So they didn't acknowledge up to now that it's financed from funds that we left, and they don't even understand the reasoning behind it. Every one of these projects was intended to solve a problem. So if you talk to the PM, he will tell you about the work they've done on the hub since we got back into office, and then he will computers that were kept in container, and all of these areas that he has commissioned internet in. Look the long list of villages that he has commissioned. This is what the Prime Minister has done. Our Prime Minister, not the rubber stamp Nagamoto, but our Prime Minister has done this since he got into office. This is, and you just talk to them, and then you'd see how lying Cathy Hughes is. She presents this veneer of sophistication and that she did all of this work, zero work. She still has not answered why she refused, after the bill was passed to liberalize telecommunication and they promised the liberalization of telecommunication in their manifesto, why she didn't sign the order. Was someone paid off? We signed it a month after we got into office. We brought the liberalization out, and because of that liberalization now, you've had massive investments in this sector, and we have, and now we've seen a reduced price for capacity and bandwidth for even on mobile devices because of that. She still has to answer that. And then, but remember, the origin of this all was they discovered that people didn't have internet, Laura George. That was the origin of it all. She discovered it. Although we're putting in the internet, they didn't put in the internet. She discovered it when she went into the hinterland. So, a set of lies again. Lies to mislead people. The same press conference, I think it was Dennis who asked, not the softball from the Kaichor News to them, pre-planned questions with the AFC. So Dennis asked about their position again on the PSA. And the same Patterson that was saying a couple of months ago that they will support the renegotiation of the project. Now they don't understand what they want to change in the project, couldn't define what they want to change in the project. Two, are saying not committing to renegotiating. Remember, they signed this lopsided agreement, not committing any longer, but committing to review now, to just review the agreement. So tell me, until today, you don't know what's wrong with this agreement? A couple of weeks ago, I was asked by the Kaichor News what problem we had with the agreement when it was signed, and I outlined at that time all the issues that we had problems with, from ring fencing to taxation to royalty rate to the relinquishment provisions, a whole range of stuff we had. We identified them specifically. We committed to change them in a new PSA. They don't know what's wrong with the PSA that they signed in 2016. Now they have to review it. But that's a backpedaling, because I suspect that he spoke with Nigel Hughes, and this is what they've done. So I'm trying to find the part. You can find it yourselves. I'll find it later. I have it somewhere. But it's really they just don't respect people, the people of this country. They don't think that we have functional memories and that we have a capacity to analyze and to see through nonsense and duplicity. So they keep shifting their position all the time. They're now going to review to find out what's wrong with the 2016 PSA. But guess what in the review they have to do? They have to take account of Exxon's interest too. In the past, it was all about Guyana. But now they will take account of Exxon's interest in the review. So, in a nutshell, nothing is going to happen about it. But last week, I spoke about Sticky Finger Patterson. And I guess he was upset a bit about it. I pointed out that he is charged for several corrupt acts. And he's before the court now. And if Nigel Hughes wanted to start with people, if he believes that he needs clean people there, he should let Cathy Hughes define the circumstances in which that will be okay, where a minister can approve contracts for herself or himself in his own ministry, and that will be okay with the AFC. Because when cross-examined in the case, the low-life case, and this evidence was brought to the fore, she said it depends. When she was asked, do you find it that this is unusual, maybe reprehensible, corrupt behavior? And and is this not wrong? And she said, it depends. So let her define in what universe and under what circumstances a minister who said, that's Nigel Hughes' wife in this friend and family party that they have, his friends and family, that's a party now, because everyone is related there or went to school with someone else. So let him ask her to define this. Because she said to the newspapers, I'm no longer responsible for day-to-day participation in this company, Video Mega. It's in the newspapers. Starbuck News all around. They tried to give her a free pass. 2 years later, we found out that she was signing checks. Still, 2 years after she claimed no involvement in the company, that she was still signing checks for that company. And then the same company she's signing on behalf of, so when they're paying for their ads or other things, she's signing the check to pay suppliers. She then turns around in her ministry and approves payment to her own company. And she said, it may not be corrupt, it depends. So let him start off by saying, under what circumstances that would not be corrupt. And whether he condones it. Should start by answering that. The second issue is, we pointed out about Patterson's behavior. So Patterson thought maybe he could get back at me. So he asked some questions. He said, when we sold, and it's important that we go back to these issues, because this is what APNU was saying in 2015. Oh, they will do audits and they will charge us for these corrupt behavior. So this was supposedly one of the corrupt things. So he said, when we sold the 20% shares in GT&T, we sold it for $30 million. But when they got into office and they contacted the people 5 million was not paid. And the people said that they gave money to somebody in the PPP, the 5 million to the PPP, 5 million US dollars. That's a lot of money. So you notice he didn't say any individual, because I know he is lying, because he could be sued. So he said they were told that they gave it to someone in the PPP. They were told the 5 million balance. So what did APNU then do? Shouldn't you have, you were trying to lock us all up, you should have investigated it. This was a serious matter. If someone from the PPP collected 5 million US dollars to cheat the revenue of the country, this should have been a major investigation. Charges should have been laid. And we're very interested in finding out who paid where they paid the $5 million. So let me give you the history of this issue. And this is what APNU will never understand about the People's Progressive Party. That's why Nigel Hughes may have said that we are a commercial enterprise. We always look out for the country and taxpayers. We manage the country like you would a business. And it's only that way, not like the wishy-washy way that the APNU wants. We manage it like a business with maximizing benefits to the shareholders of the country, which is the people of this country. And we bring the same orientation and the same sort of skill to that. So I have here the request for expression. This was in 1st of August 2010. We advertised for the sale of the shares of the 20% of GT&T that we had. And before we talk about that, let me come back to people who don't have a history of this. So you recall, before 1992, privatization was done by APNU. They had 4 entities doing privatization: Public Cooperation Secretariat, the Ministry, the State Planning Commission, the Office of the President, and the Ministry of Finance. And then they had other agencies that would get small ones. So they carved up all the public enterprises. The paint company and the rice mill in King Grove went to the Office of the President. And then a person related to a minister got that done. The state planning privatized the DTL. And DTL, go back to the story and you'd see weeks after it was privatized, Lord Beaverbrook, to whom it was privatized, resold it at a massive profit. I can go down the long list, but let's come to the GT&T. So GT&T, the shares were sold, 80% of the shares sold for 16 million US, I think, without any public tender. Now, these things never went to public tender. Never went to public tender. So they sold 80% of the shares for $16 million. In the receivables and the bank account of the company at that time, it was state-owned, had 5 million US. So it's about 11 million in a net sense. The company in the first year or 2 years of operation, they paid back for what they paid for the shares. They paid back. No public tender whatsoever. And then 20% remain with the government. So that is how the 20% remain. But by the way, if you look at In 2012, just after I demitted office, we tabled in Parliament a document that showed the entire history of privatization, everything we privatized, the method of privatization, and also the sums received from 1992 to 2011. There is that document. You can find it in the public domain. We presented it in Parliament. So there's a public record of how we did it. We don't have any public records of anything that happened on the APNU, their era of privatization. So this was how this transaction took place. So the 20% remained, so we said we're privatizing it. The same one that he's talking about now. So we went to a public tender. Chronicle 26 times, Kaichor 6 times, Stabrook 7 times, Trinidad Express 25 times, Orlando Weekly 9 times. This is how many times it was advertised. We then sent it to our missions abroad, and we also sent it to 6 embassies here locally for them to share with their bidders. We got several proposals that came in, and we got one bid. Several people picked up the package. We got one bid, after publicly advertising now for $7 million for the 20% shares. $7 million, and it came from Caribbean International Distributors, Inc. $7 million. With VAT at 1.1 million, that would have been $8.120 million. That was the bid that we got. We then decided it was too low. And so we asked the embassies to look at that. The Ambassador David Dabadine worked with this Chinese company. We got a proposal for $25 million. We said no, we wanted $30 million. From 7, through open public tender, we then concluded at $30 million. The agreement stated that 60 days after the execution of the agreement, we'll receive the $25 million, which we did immediately. And then the $5 million would be paid over a period that's defined in the contract. That's all public record. So the company did not pay the $5 million, they defaulted. And by now, we have collected by garnishing their dividends, because GT&T, the dividends from GT&T are paid over to us. We have collected another $7.2 million. So we now receive $32 million, because when they went to court on the APNU, this was done, and the court ruled that there should be a 12% interest. And now we have asked the company for another $2.5 million, I was told by NISL. So we'd end up about $35 million getting. Now, Patterson claimed that the $5 million was given to somebody in the PPP. That's why the people didn't want to pay. So it's part of the contract. This is how you could tell he lies now about it, after we've been exposing Patterson's and his proclivities and his sticky finger proclivities. Now, Patterson, I think, said this, but since Patterson is so concerned about China, he should answer the 2 questions that I saw Mr. Bagwandian posted. And Patterson blocked him, and then the AFC blocked him, that Patterson refused to answer. So the first question was, on his trip to Macau, which Chinese companies did he meet, and did any of them pay for his trip to Macau? He went to Macau as minister. So will he answer those questions? I'm answering the question. He said somebody in the PPP, he didn't identify, was trying to steal their $5 million. Total lie, but they've repeated it so often that people may believe it. So I've given a full explanation. I've given you dates. You can check this. I hope the media will check the open public tender and what we did. We've gotten out, we got more than 3 times, in fact 4 times more than the open public tender yielded. If we had offered that, we could have, if we wanted to be corrupt, we could have given it to the 7 million guy who won it through an open bid. We said no, it undervalues the share. We got all the money. But will he answer that? And secondly, why, so did he refund the 10,000 US dollars that was placed in his account by a Chinese company that was for a trip that was paid for by the government of Guyana? So the government of Guyana paid for this trip, but he claimed that he was reimbursed by a Chinese company into his account. And how did that company get his banking details? Now, before somebody transfer money into your bank, you have to give them your banking details. He didn't answer that. And then, since we're asking questions, did he make a large transfer of money to Brazil to the father of an individual who had claimed that another member of the AFC sexually molested him? Ask him these questions. Since they're getting nasty, because they do that all the time, these people have a closet full of skeletons. And ask him if now he's concerned about PPP corruption. You hear him, if he would stop, if he's still wearing the gold bangle that he claimed that he's now wearing, that he never wore, and we caught him with a picture wearing it. He said, I never wore any gold jewelry. And then we discovered that it's a ministry that bought it for him and he was wearing it in a picture that everyone now has become famous. They're a bunch of liars. And asked him, how did he also, how did he get the bid that he took to cabinet, the unsolicited bid? There's so many questions. So if Patterson, I think he wants to ask me questions about who in the PPP got the money. Well, nobody that I know of in the PPP got the money, because the 5 million, because it was part of the agreement. If you read the agreement, and it was, we got a great deal here, a great deal, given what I just explained, and the money was there in the agreement. The only reason the legal action succeeded is because the agreement showed that they had to pay another 5 million, the full purchase price. So I've answered your question. But I hope he will answer mine. And the reason I'm spending so much time on this, because it will resurface, just like Glenn Lal used to say that the Marriott is owned by Jagdeo's friends, you know, for 2015, and they bought that and they were going to convert it into a hospital. It was corrupt, and then they discovered it fully government owned. All of these things, and everything under the airport. Ask Patterson about the airport too. Why did he take an agreement for a new airport that we left and convert it into the rehabilitation of the airport? Should have had a new terminal building there now. We now have to contend with the patchwork that they did to fix up the old terminal building, because he gave approval for that. What was the consideration? Ask him what was the consideration for doing that? So Nigel Lewis could talk all that he wants on the AFC. We know what they're about. We know that's just two members. I'll come to the others a little bit later because they have a long list of skeletons in their cupboard, and I'm saving Nigel Lewis for the last. So when they talk about corruption, I noticed the more waves, Suriname boasts of a better oil contract or better oil contract terms than Guyana. Not that anyone actually boasted about this, but it's true that they have better terms than our 2016 agreement has. And who is responsible for this again? The APNU AFC. So if you look at their royalty rate of 6.2% royalty, we've just put in our new PSA 10% royalty rate. That's the new condition. But the agreement that they have today is better than the 2016 agreement. And we pointed this out many times. How many times have we pointed this out? Who is to be blamed for this? It is the same APNU AFC. How did we try to fix this? We sought to fix it by getting more benefits from the contract through local content, the local content law, the gas to energy project, so that we can claim other non-fiscal benefits from the contract. And we've had Exxon agree with that from the time we got into office. But this is great, and I'm happy for Suriname. Very happy for them. They've worked very hard at this. When I saw this, I spoke with the foreign minister and I congratulated him, and I sent a message to President Santoki, and he responded to the message that we were pleased for Suriname, that they actually have been able to get an FID now and they can move forward. And we're looking forward to working with Suriname on synergies. The project will focus a lot on oil, so we still need to look at the development of gas. And that is what we are trying, because Suriname, they found quite a bit of gas, and our discoveries closer to the Suriname border had more gas in them. So we still need to try to collaborate. In the context of our project or aim to monetize this gas, either within the context of that project or separately, but we still need to have a discussion on this. And I spoke with the Foreign Minister Ramdin, and he wants to come with a team of people. And I've said I'll give him a date when we can have those discussions. So we are pleased with that Suriname is moving forward. We hope that the countries in Africa and the other countries who have discovered oil recently or gas, that they be allowed to use gas to generate power and not be told that they have to just save the world when the rest of the world is expanding their gas production, particularly the developed world, and they're talking about energy security for their people, and they want Africa not to use its gas to generate power because that will not be the appropriate renewable mix. I hope that Africa doesn't listen. Thank God they're not listening to some of these people, and that they pursue their development with vigor and to have cheap energy for their people. The developed world needs to be responsible. They're the ones who are putting out the greatest amount of emissions historically and now with some other big developing countries, and therefore they have to bear the brunt of adjustments earlier and not to leave Africa or the Caribbean or anyone else or countries in Asia in energy poverty or with high prices. We will not support that. And thankfully, we've had this coalition working on this. I've had discussions with several African ministers and leaders, and we are moving forward in this regard, that we have to develop these resources to ensure that our people have a chance at progressing too. And we can do this responsibly and even now sensibly, and it will have a beneficial impact on climate change, because a lot of those countries are now generating power, like in Guyana's case, from burning either coal or more polluting fuels like bunker C or diesel. So even going to gas will be a cleaner fuel for them. But I'm pleased that Suriname has got its first FID and that they will now invest probably to start producing by 2027, 2028 their first oil. We're looking forward to working with them in the future, and to look at what kinds of also shared infrastructure we can have, because we're two contiguous countries, the only two contiguous countries in CARICOM. I've seen a good letter today from someone, Royston King, I think it was, about the single window framework, and with the need to work to make this functional. But this is a major initiative of the government. For too long, people have bypassed the planning framework. On one hand, they've had people who sometimes draw their plans for them and then approve the same plans, the engineers or the other officials in an NDC or the municipality. So they pay the same people to draw their plans for a building, and then those are the same people approving it. Shouldn't happen. So that's on one hand. And then, of course, wanton approval of plans without regard for any sort of planning in the NDC or in the town. You know, approving things that really should not be approved. So that's on one hand. On the other hand, you have legitimate people who have done their plan properly, and they're waiting forever to have those plans approved. So their houses can't be built, their houses can't be expanded, their factories can't be built, or any other business venture, because somewhere some official is not doing his or her work, or they're soliciting a bribe. And so the idea is that this single window framework will seek to eliminate those bottlenecks and to improve planning in the country. That was the idea, and that is why we passed the law. Now, clearly, the points made about the public awareness, we need to do more work on this, and that we need to share database among the local authorities, and that we need to build capacity, and we also have to have a dedicated section department to deal with this, because if the single window starts functioning slow than the other systems across the country, the move to centralize this would have been a failure. And therefore, although we passed the law and we're moving to address it, the points are well taken, that we need to do more public awareness of surrounding this issue, and we need to build capacity at every level to implement the program. And we need to work still in a very collaborative fashion with the local government bodies to ensure that these things happen. So it is a very important thing that was done. So I see an editorial in the Starbuck News, two ones again. So the editorial in the Starbuck News about our clear instructions to public officers on procurement matters. So first, they complain that people may be influenced or they may be violating the procurement law because of instructions that they receive or lack of awareness of the law and its provisions. We sought to fix all of this and made it clear this will not be tolerated at the political level. Will not be tolerated. So people know now that they're responsible and they were for compliance with the procurement laws, and that they will bear the consequences that should we find breaches. We've already seen that from the time we spoke on one visit to Region 8. Last week, we got a number of things. One engineer there in the region, he just bid to so he's based in Madhya, and then put in a bid through the public process, an open bidding process, but through MPTAB, and got a contract for $28 million because they just look at whoever had the best bid. But this guy is also the regional engineer. He didn't come through the regional system. He went through an open public tender and submitted a bid. But he got a bid for work done in Madhya itself. Now, if you're based an engineer and you're based in Madhya working for the RDC, and you're the contractor for a project in Madhya, people wouldn't care, oh, it's NPTAB that gave that and you participate in an open bid. This is the kind of conflict I spoke of. So now I think he has a choice. It's either he gave up one of the two roles. I think he has a choice now. He either want to be a contractor or remain working as an engineer with the government. You can't be both and working in the same community in which you're the engineer, even if you bid through another agency and not the region. And we've had a number of other things exposed there, and we're addressing them. This came to our attention. And so people are now, I think, they're bringing this to our attention. We didn't know. The MPTAB didn't know. We asked them, they said, oh, we don't know this guy is the regional engineer. He bid through an open process. They did not know. And once this comes to our attention, people have to make a determination. So they're worried about my 95% figure, and then said, oh, it might be not the real figure. And even so, the 5% remains completely unacceptable. That's precisely what I said. I said, people don't pay attention, the media and the opposition will never give you credit for the 95% that's done completely and unsatisfactorily. They will focus on the 5%. So we have an obligation to pay attention to the 5% to see that nothing happens. So this conclusion is exactly what we said to people. And secondly, they went back again to the same TPU and a couple of other contracts, the same thing that I accused them of, that they can't find it widespread, so they would select a few contracts. You have 10,000 contracts being done, so they would name 3 contracts and say, oh, that casts doubt on the 95% figure. It's nonsense. I think we have taken a strong view, not a word from an editorial in Stabroek News. I wish they would editorialize about the 5 years, the 5 lost years on the apno to public procurement. I can challenge them to find a single bid that was there on the website, public information. Everything from September 2021 that was issued from MPTAP is on the website. Every contract, not a single word. So I would expect that from them. And I noticed this thing about cost of living again. But the background is they would never put in the stories all that we have done to address cost of living. As I said before, I don't think a single country here or in the developed world has done relatively have done what we have done in a relative sense for key components, drivers of cost of living, key components, from the cost of transport and electricity and water and internet and mortgages and helping the farmers through fertilizers and all of that sort of stuff. The food prices, we dealt with it already. That food prices sometimes goes up and down, and I pointed this out, that the president will, when he speaks to the parliament, he will be addressing cost of living alone. He'll be speaking to parliament, but he will also speak about this matter. But he will point out all that we have done so far. That the opposition is saying, first, that they will remove all those subsidies to keep the cost of living. Now they've changed it to keep the cost of living down. Now they've changed again. I'll end there. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Tamika Garnett, Guyana Times. I have 2 quick questions. My first question pertains to a report about the LIAT application to return to Guyana. I know that LIAT 2020 is not related to LIAT 1974 Limited, but can you say to what extent will the government be holding the sins of that previous company against this new company? And what reassurances can be put in place going forward so that Guyanese, that LIAT 2020 just doesn't pick up with Guyanese money and then come back as LIAT 2030? What will be put in place to protect us should we go forward with allowing LIAT 2020 to fly Guyana skies?
No. The airlines, let me deal with LIAT first. So they would have to go through a regulatory process. So first of all, when an airline applies to fly from Guyana to another destination or from a destination to Guyana, they have to get the approval of the regulatory body. That's number one. The politicians don't interfere there because that's about safety, etc. For scheduled airlines, we didn't have a bond. But for chartered airlines, because we had put in place a bond since I was president, because we had that experience when people, they would sell tickets and then if they go belly up, people may not have recourse to get back their money. So if it's a chartered airline, then it has to put up a bond. If it's scheduled, then it does not have to. But we clearly have to step up on consumers' protection. Some countries, especially Europe, have passed several pieces of legislation to make the airlines more accountable for performance. We've had some atrocious cases. British Airways once, someone I know flew on that flight. They got delayed for 2 days nearly in Antigua. Something got wrong with the plane. Then they left people on their own practically. They then flew on to the UK. So the person missed the connecting flight. And they had to buy a new ticket. British Airways refused to participate in that. They bought a ticket, go on to China. On the way back, so they still have a return ticket from British Airways to Ghana. Had to buy a complete new ticket now. And British Airways gets away with it scot-free. So I told the person, just write it up and put it into the ministry, because this is what happens. And the person did not want to take any action because they said, oh, I'd have to hire a lawyer and stuff. But I think we need some test cases here. So clearly, we need to start looking a bit more at how we protect people who are flying and what the obligations of these airlines are. LIAT, I don't know about the details and the configuration, whether it's backed by the governments of the Caribbean, etc., or it's a totally private venture. And therefore, I don't want to comment on that matter. The best person to do so will be Minister Edgell. He may know a bit more about the application and how it's being processed there. But clearly we need to do more in this regard. I intend to have a discussion with Minister Onej on this matter about protection of the Guyanese public, the traveling public.
My next question pertains to the situation that's building over on the West Bank, the road and the residents. Minister Inda recently met with the contractors after there was a roadblock in Free and Easy. Residents blocked the road because of the speeding of the truck, the dust, and the damaged state of the roads. Earlier, prior to that, there was a roadblock in Friesland. To what extent is the government looking into a long-term? I know that Minister Indar said they're wetting the roads now to prevent the dust a little bit, and they spoke to the trucks about speeding. But given that we're seeing now, this is the second incident of residents coming out with concerns, and it could escalate to even something bigger. And it's also the only roadway to the gas energy project, and we don't want to affect that. To what extent is the government looking into a long-term solution to the roadway itself and the concerns that citizens have with the trucks and the speeding?
Yeah, sure. So we're spent on this project itself a substantial sum of money to upgrade the road and bridges so you could take the trucks in and the other things to the construction site. And it is my expectation that we will ensure that the residents there, that they will face, let's be practical, they will face some level of discomfort in the construction phase. Because the mere fact that you have more trucks on the road will create problems for people. I'm not talking about the dust, because when you have a lot of trucks passing all the time. I met with the school kids last week at the convention center to talk about the oil and gas sector. So they had lots of questions. So I said, any sector. And one young lady said to me, she's living at Peters Hall, and the trucks also use not the main road, they use the side roads to come in. And that it's creating a lot of problems for the residents there. In Camberville, we had the same thing. People complained to me. I asked Edgel to go out and meet with the residents, that people, the new highway through Conversation Tree, that they speed down, the trucks speed there. They do it to bypass the main traffic on Sheriff Street, and they create a lot of problems for people. They're speeding, the houses vibrate, and we have to find solutions. Speed humps, traffic lights, more police presence in these areas, cameras to watch them. They were rolling out some more cameras so you can observe this. So people are going to face some more discomfort. And I heard from Indar, I spoke with Minister Indar, I'm aware of the issue for the people who are suffering there. I spoke with him. He said it's not just the dust, but the trucks, sometimes they're wild drivers. The kids are there. That's what I mean by discomfort. They don't drive with any regard for human life. So he was supposed to meet with the contractors to lay down the rules for using the road. Not just wetting the road temporarily in the period whilst we're constructing, but you have to have asphaltic roads, proper roads, in all of those areas where they don't generate the dust. And so this period whilst we're constructing, we will have that level of discomfort. It's like in many other communities, you know, you go to places, they're digging up the roads, 10 trucks are using the road all the time because they're building some big shopping mall or a big building going up next to people's homes. It's creating some discomfort, and we understand this. We sympathize with people. It's going to get better once the construction is completed. But I think they have to cover the road with a surface that would allow it not to generate the dust. But that may not be possible immediately. But it has to be done so that people in that West Bank too, that they can have better infrastructure, more jobs, everything in the community. But that they're also safe. So I'm aware of the issue. I spoke with him twice during the course of the week, because people from the area called me too. They told me about the problems.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo, and Aslam Sky True News. Sir, the former PM and the current ambassador from Guyana to the U.S., Mr. Hines, has said that the $4.4 billion that we would have gotten from oil is already causing a lot of trouble, and to press for more would cause further headache for Guyana.
What did they say? The money is causing headache?
Yes. So as a finance,
money causing
the
us headache?
$4.4 billion is already causing a lot of problems when it comes to like absorbing it and that kind of thing. And if we press for more, it may cause further trouble. As a finance person, what are your thoughts on this?
Now, the problem with commenting on something that I've not read is because I didn't see the ambassador saying that. Which ambassador?
Sam Hines.
Oh, Sam.
Yes,
oh,
he
Sam
wrote a
Hines.
letter.
Oh, okay. PM. Now, Sam has a big head like mine, and he is a very cerebral person. Let me tell you something if you don't know about Sam. Sam is a person who honest to the bone and very thoughtful. And he will think through things, like he will talk things through in the public domain. So I suspect what he is talking about, I've now read what he said, is about the issue of the Dutch disease. I think that's what he would probably aiming to deal with, and which is a big concern of this government too. A big concern, the Dutch disease is a concern. So but when he speaks, you must see this as an honest kind of public discourse, allowing his thought patterns to explore all the ideas. And that's how I see it. He has been, when I was president, he was one of the solid voices for reasoning, looking at every option when we were there. And you need people like that who will not be blinkered and think that they know everything. People like Sam, they would just make sure that every alternative is at the table. So I have great respect for his opinion, etc. I don't know the context in which he made those remarks, but clearly, so far, the oil resources are just a fraction of our total expenditure. I pointed this out, and you in the Kaichor know this, that it's less than 30% of our total budget. So that is in terms of financing of the budget. So for all of those who think we are awash with large sums of money and we can use it for everything under the sun, there now, I think more and more the opposition is realizing, after we had to go through what 1.5% is and what 10% is really. And we've had to gone through, almost educate them on this. They've realized now that the oil money we have received so far is just a fraction of our financing needs at this point in time. And that will change over the future. But we constantly have to be mindful about absorptive capacity in the country, and that the utilization of the resources don't change relative prices. And that we don't need, because there could be a time where you spend so much money in the country that it affects the change in the currency, its appreciation, and that will have a negative impact on all of the other non-oil sectors. So I think that might be what Sam was really getting at. But we haven't reached that as yet. We haven't reached that stage, but we're very mindful of it in planning. But he is free. He's one person who is free to express his views, because I know he comes from an honest place, not like some of these crooks that we have to deal with every day.
Secondly, President Ali has hailed China's significant contribution to Guyana's development. But on the other hand, we are seeing that there are small vendors who are complaining that the Chinese businesses at the supermarkets are pushing them out of business. How does the government plan to balance Chinese presence with the Guyanese businesses, especially the smaller ones?
So I've been in contact with some of the people who are claiming that they're being displaced by Chinese businesses establishing in their communities. A number of other people have contacted us too. These are people, Guyanese people, businessmen, who are pro-Chinese. They believe that they rent places to the Chinese businesses, and they also say that they get paid immediately if they supply them. So these are suppliers, etc. And many small people too. So you have two groups of people who have opposing views on the Chinese presence in Guyana. The people who I spoke with about 4 persons, and they recognize that you can't stop a foreigner once they get access into the country, because we don't have restriction on foreigners or foreign companies establishing business in Guyana. There's no restriction on it. And it's hard to put a restriction based on nationality. So we can say oh, the Chinese can't open business here. Only it's reserved for Canadians, or Americans can't open business here. It's reserved only for people from India or some part of the world. You can't place restrictions of that nature or on opening business based on nationality. It would not only be against WTO, but it would run you into a very difficult foreign policy situation. So the people who are claiming competitive disadvantage recognize that. However, they're saying that they do not have a level playing field, and they have a point there. They argue that sometimes these companies bypass regulatory approval, and the regulatory agencies don't hold them accountable for the laws of Guyana. So they put up a building that breaches the building permits. No ventilation there on the building. They will get a visit from the inspector, and who says, oh, to sell pharmaceuticals here, you have to have proper ventilation. But next door, there is a Chinese company selling pharmaceuticals that has no ventilation whatsoever. They're not applying the law uniformly. Secondly, they said that these Chinese, to get permit, so if you're selling different things like alcohol, you can't sell it where in a supermarket without getting the requisite permission. You need separate permits to sell different things. So that some of the Chinese entities, if you go in, they sell everything under the sun without the requisite permits. And they are held accountable now for getting permits and limited by the regulatory authorities in what they can sell. So they claim a disadvantage because they say, if a person goes in to, I'm selling beer, but you go to buy, say, nails at a store, like one of these sell-all stores. But if the beer is selling right there, you're not going to leave the place where you're buying the nails from and then come over to my place to buy the beer. You'll buy it just there because it's convenient. But they may not have the approval to sell the beer. So they're claiming disadvantage there too. They claim that on the GRA does not pay the careful attention for payment of VAT and other things, like, or hold them accountable for paying VAT and other taxes that they have to pay. So we've made it clear to the regulatory bodies, you have to enforce the law uniformly. You have to. And we believe that sometimes people are induced not to do that. So we're paying careful attention to this. So to the extent that they have these issues occurring, the people who are protesting, they're right about it. I would have done that myself. If I'm next door to someone and he doesn't have to observe the law, and I have to do so, particularly when I'm a native to this country, and then you have a person of foreign origin opening something there. So that's how we approach it. But we can't, if the idea is to stop people based on nationality, it would be impossible to do it. What if people say, China says, we're not going to sell Guyana any of our goods anymore. So you can't import anything from China because you don't want our people you stopped us based on the nationality to sell in Guyana, the people to sell. You can't do that, discriminate on the basis of nationality, but you can ensure compliance based with the laws of the country. So they have to pay their fair taxes, they have to look at all of the regulations, and if our people are not allowed to sell multiple things in a single store, then they must not too. They must have separate stores for this. But on the other hand, you have a whole slew of Guyanese too, who believe that they can go, these people work, they say to me, I go to the community and they say, oh, the Guyanese man who got the shop in the village, they close up at midday and open back at 2 in the morning, 2 o'clock. That's my lunch break. I can't get anything, I can't get to buy my stuff. These Chinese open from morning right into the night. So they say that to you as a politician. They say that to you. A man said to me, if there wasn't a Chinese store, my toilet wouldn't function the whole weekend because I couldn't get something to put on his toilet malfunction. People, you're caught in the middle on this matter. So you have to balance interests here too, because there are lots of people who say that they're benefiting from better service in their communities too. But these people must pay their taxes too. They have to pay their taxes, they have to comply with all our laws.
Finally, Chartered Accountant Mr. Ram is of the view that the rapid pace of the oil and gas sector is preventing Guyanese from enjoying real benefits from the sector. He said that because we don't have the capacity, it is robbing us from having real local content. He has thus called for a reform in the Local Content Act. How do you view this?
So, if you don't have the capacity, so the local content law is, if we don't have the capacity, we allow them to bring in the capacity. If we have it here, then we must allow our own people to get the jobs or the opportunity. The jobs. And then there are some areas carved out specifically for Guyanese. So we're going through the revision. So first of all, we should hail this act as the biggest impact. We don't talk much about our success, but this act in itself is a great success. This act by the end of this year will drive $700 million of business to our local companies. That's not a small sum of money. That's $150 billion. That is a major, major change. And we intend to create even more room for our people, provided they develop the capacity. Look at the audit. So the audit was supposed to go to the cabinet today or maybe next week. You asked me the third one. I found out, and the audit will go to the cabinet for approval. But when we try to involve local people in the audit, they were run down by the Kaicho News and others more than even the foreigners when they did the audit. So you can't have it both ways. You can't, when we take a risk with our local people and give them the work to build capacity, and we say, you have to come in with a foreign company, so their skill is transferred. We take that risk, we get hammered for taking the risk that they are not great enough. And then on the other hand, you say, oh, we're not getting the opportunity, so we can't build the capacity. That is what we encounter every day, particularly from the Kaicho News. And so it is our intention to strengthen this law. It's our intention to expand the opportunities available to our people. It's our intention to close the loopholes that some foreign companies are utilizing. It's our intention to because some of them get high-paying jobs, right? So the management, they have higher paying jobs for the foreigners, but over time, they have to change the management. So a lot of the companies now, some of the big companies, and we'll start exposing them, they're trying to get their foreign staff, claiming that they lived here for 5 years, and to get them nationality, Guyanese nationality. So these are the foreign staff now. They were trying to, so they don't have to Guyanize. They use the same people, but just get a Guyanese nationality for them. We're watching that carefully. So I hope if some of them are applying for it, I've seen some of the big companies applying for that, they're not going to get, let me say here now, they're not going to succeed. They're not succeeding. We're watching them carefully. They have to give our people more opportunities and better paying jobs too. Some of these companies will do everything. That's what they were doing before the law. Just imagine if we didn't have the law, where we would have been today. You want to bet me that maybe 50 million of the 700 million would have come to Guyanese if we didn't pass that. That's one of the big successes of the PPP government, passing that law, and we're getting more non-fiscal benefits now from the oil and gas companies here, because they're spending, that's the 700 million spent now becomes income for Guyanese companies. This is the non-fiscal benefits that we're getting. If we didn't pass that, we'd be worse off today. That is why I spoke about two things that we have quietly, without the big fanfare, tried to eke out more benefits from the 2016 agreement, the flawed 2016 agreement. We didn't shout at the top of our voices, we just steadily pursued two projects, that and the gas to energy project, and we said the 50 million cubic feet of gas, just cost that and see how much more per year we are getting in if we had to pay for that gas. It runs into maybe $100 million that we would have had to pay for it. That is a free benefit to our people now. So we have managed to eke this out more from the flawed agreements. Yes.
Naomi Paris for the Guyana Chronicle. Could you provide an update for the proposals for the international runway in Lethem?
Oh, okay. So right now we are just implementing the several projects we have. So that's completion of the bridges, the 45 bridges, and then the bridge across the Mara River at Wisma, the paving of the road to Mabura Hill, that's it. And then and also the maintenance of the Laterite Road, the remaining part of the Laterite Road. We're also looking to see a proposal, a low-cost, maybe 2-lane bridge across the Kurupukari River, because then that will complete the whole network. You'll be able to drive from Lethem straight to Georgetown without having to cross or go on a pontoon to cross the river at the Kurupukari, and bring heavy trucks down to, and take our goods too. So if you import containers to ship into northern Brazil, like a lot, they may need a lot of the lime for the agriculture sector. You can truck these right into Brazil without stopping or going on pontoon. So that's where we are on that matter. We're going to have more discussions with the Brazilian government on the remaining part, the pay of the remaining part. We discussed this with President Lula, but we intend to follow this up. But we've been a little busy we want to complete those projects first. And those themselves would make a big difference to the people who live in that region, and also to people using the road.
Also, could you say if the manpower survey to examine the skills needed for when the new hospitals come on stream was completed, and what were the outcomes?
Yes, I told Frank Anthony to meet with the gentleman. I don't have this survey here, but he has the details of it. As we said before, we will need about 3,000 persons to work in the 6 hospitals that will come on stream by the first quarter to the second quarter of next year. It'll be fully functional. We need about 3,000 persons, about 500 per hospital. That includes cleaners, porters, drivers, a whole range of people. And then when the remaining hospitals are completed, the other 6 hospitals, some would be large, like the maternal and the children hospital here in Georgetown and the one in New Amsterdam. Those are huge ones, but those would require more people. But then there'll be smaller ones, like the ones in the hinterland may just need 100 persons because they're mainly diagnostic centers, major state-of-the-art diagnostic centers and hospitals, but smaller population. So when you add those two, plus the refurbishment of Linden and new hospital at best now we are looking at, but the refurbishment of places like Linden and Bartica, etc., and the existing hospitals around the country, you're talking about another 3,005. So that will be a lot. As soon as I told you before, as soon as we move out that children and maternity unit from the Georgetown Hospital, we will then focus on upgrading the Georgetown Hospital itself, but modern, with little parks there because we'd have more space. We have already a concept with parks and in places, recreational areas within the hospital and whole range, the area where it is now. So you'd have a modern looking park with a hospital complex with park and stuff. So but that will be for the next storm. That's not now because we still need to move the maternal and children unit out for us. So the manpower survey is not limited to that. Simultaneously, we're looking at, I told you already, the training for people in the hospitality sector. So we need 3,000-4,000 people. And it's a rapid build-up because the hotels are gonna start coming on stream very soon. So it's a rapid build-up of those skill training. We may have to work with the owners of these hotels directly to support their training. There's one thing that we have to look at. It's these call centers around the Caribbean. I saw 2 in Jamaica were closed. Some of the call centers here I've seen already, because people are losing business abroad. So they claim that they're very sensitive businesses, and sometimes they lose business based on the quality of work, but that's not the main factor. What is happening globally is that a lot of people there's a reorganization of the business, and a lot of AI is being used now to perform the functions that people use to perform like as individuals, like answering phones and stuff like that. They're using bots and all of these to perform those tasks. So AI, that's one of the negatives of AI. It will displace large numbers of people from labor-intensive industries. They will become more capital intensive and, well, not so much capital intensive. They'd employ less people in these areas. So we have to constantly look at those people, the ones who may lose jobs. I spoke with Ashni Singh and the others already. We see if we need to retrain people and to find other opportunities for them. So we will have to work with people to absorb them who might lose jobs. So we are looking in these areas. We have a greater possibility here because you have so many job opportunities in the city, in Region 4. And most of these call centers are in the Region 4. So we have a greater possibility of absorbing the labor quickly. So we're paying attention to that issue too. There are lots of different areas. Clearly, the construction industry needs a lot more skilled people. If you talk to Hamilton, the training that we're doing now there is unbelievable. It's a large number of people are getting the skill and the certification necessary to work in the construction sector. And I urge people to utilize these opportunities more. So we're not waiting on a perfect manpower plan. We know what the skills we need to produce now, and we've already embarked upon that. We're not waiting on any perfect manpower plan, but we had the need to do this at a technical level, and so it's being done for various sectors.
Cordell Jones, Live Wire News. Dr. Jagdeo, is the government supportive of the Bridgetown initiative?
Yes, we're very supportive of the initiative. And the initiative has gone through several iterations, and it builds on a lot of advocacy that has been pursued by the developing world and by CARICOM itself over a number of years. It has reflected a lot of the aspirations of the developing world for a more just global system that takes account of their peculiarities. So in a nutshell, that is what it's about. And it focuses on two areas mainly. In the financial sector, to build a global financial system that would allow small developing countries with all of their limitations to prosper without the need for a global handout. And secondly, it is focused on building in maintaining the principle that was first established in the climate negotiations, both in Rio and when the Kyoto Protocol was signed, the common but differentiated responsibility, justice for it. And so if you look at almost all the initiatives, you would see it mentioning things like the multidimensional vulnerability index being used now by the UN to assess these countries. In the past, gross domestic product was the only factor that was used. So a country that may have a lot of problems, say St. Kitts Nevis, might have a higher GDP than the other countries in the world, the least developed countries, but may have even a worse problem with replicating and reproducing its labor force and also maintaining its level of social service to their communities, and may even be more debt stressed than an LDC. But they would graduate out of multilateral assistance or preferential multilateral assistance, particularly by the IFIs, because they were judged on the basis of this sole criterion, which is per capita GDP. When you look at a multidimensional vulnerability index, then you start looking at all levels of vulnerability. So an LDC may be less vulnerable than a more developed country in the world because of geographic factors. So like CARICOM countries are in the hurricane zone, and therefore they get hit a lot by hurricane. They're more vulnerable to climate change. So we are pleased now with the use of this index by the UN. We now need to get this index embraced warmly at the bilateral level and by the IFIs. If that happens, then there will be an acceleration of the progress we have made in getting like contingent lines of credit for disaster, like the debt pause clause that we managed to get in contracts, now loan agreements. This would happen. So that you can have lower cost financing flowing to these countries to address their development needs. And then on the climate side, adaptation is key for us. So the Bridgetown Initiative focuses a lot on adaptation, loss and damage. You know, that was, since that concept came up in Poland, when we had the COP in Poland, and now only, I don't know how many years after I was president then. So it is only now they have agreed to the establishment of the loss and damage fund and to put in place a board and allocated 700 million US to it. But 700 million US is practically nothing when you look at the historic, because this was to deal with historic losses. But we're pleased that at least the fund has been established. We need now more adaptation resources to come to address current foolproofing of the economy or climate proofing of the economies. So there is a push by the Bridgetown Initiative to ensure that that happens too. They have called for several things. In fact, in the Bridgetown Initiative, as to how this could be financed. So taxes on aviation and shipping, taxes on windfall profit for oil and gas companies, a global financial tax. These are not new things. If you look at the report that was issued when the UN Secretary General established a high-level committee to look at raising $100 billion per year. I was part of that committee, Larry Summers, Christine Lagarde, who became the head of the IMF, Sri Mulyani, a whole range of people. And those ideas were there as to how you can finance raising money more for renewable and adaptation particularly. But the key thing in the Bridgetown Initiative that we have always argued about, then at the UN Secretary General Committee, and now I will continue to argue for this because we may have a disagreement with some countries that do subscribe to the Bridgetown Initiative, that the burden of the taxation must not fall equally on the developing world. Because if you do that, then you will basically be doing, we move from common but differentiated responsibility to equal burden sharing. And we don't subscribe to that principle. So these are some of the things that the initiative speaks of, but we're very supportive of it. We're very supportive, and we want to thank Barbados for pushing it. They're moving, in fact, to establish, I think the legislation was in place, a blue-green bank in Barbados. We will be part of that bank. Guyana will be part of it. We made a commitment to that too. So it's a good initiative worthy of support, and it brings together all that we have argued for over a number of years, and we have not been successful globally because you have a global financial and climate change process that is captured by and reflective of the interests of the developed world. Not just, I just said, financial and climate, but even trading system. The WTO suffered the same feature to or consequence. Our age-old problem from the part of the developing world is to push back and to try to shape these systems in a manner that allows transformation, growth, development, but at the same time would be reflective of our concerns as developing countries.
AFC leader Nigel Hughes stated that if the PPPC loses the upcoming general and regional elections, his party would push for independent forensic audits to investigate suspected corruption and prosecute those responsible. How do you view these comments in light of the revelations from the Public Accounts Committee about the spending during the APNU's AFC's tenure?
Yeah, if we had to do this, then almost entire group of people would have been prosecuted. So you have the drug bond. The drug bond, until now, we don't know how we ended up paying $12 million a month for a house renting a house in which street it is? Sussex Street. We're spending $12 million a month, excluding VAT, for renting a house and calling it a drug bond. No public tender. Shouldn't we lock up some people too for that? We just moved on. We had a 1.6 billion spent on the Durban Park Stadium. 600 million missing there. So far, can't be accounted for. Who should we lock up? Patterson was in part of this project, and people from the office of the president. They were part of that project. This is leaving out the money that they collected from private individuals. People said they gave them $15 million, $30 million to assist with that project. If you talk to the businessmen, they said, we were called in and said, we want to help. They wanted our help to build this stadium there. They never gave account for how much money they collected and from whom and who was collecting the money. And so first they said, oh, this is a private project, no public funds. It moved from that private project to the state financing it all. Money missing. You don't think we should have locked up some people there too? Jordan, there are several land transfers. Look at the land in London. So the MPs, several MPs and their families got land, Jordan neighbors got land. After the elections, Pato was charged for one thing, but Pato could have been charged for the jewelry and all of that he took. You can't take government money and buy yourself all of the fancy jewelry to walk around the town. And I just spoke about $10,000 in his account, and I don't know if he's paid it back as yet. You want me to go on? What about Video Mega? She should be in charge too. We just moved on. We focus on health. The 12 hospitals, how are we going to get them going? They had nothing. We didn't manage to get them going. The highways that they had no plan for, we started implementing. The power plant, we moved on to the power plant. We started making changes. We training people. The 50,000 people paid for by the government on scholarship, now training them. That's what we did. We could have every week got one of them in Soku and let that dominate the news feed. And that's why I said sometimes we're thing. And look at the forensic audit they did. They did forensic audit. They had partisan people who came in and did the audit. They had Christopher Ram, who was campaigning with them. Gulsaran was close to them. All of the people, Gulsaran got called to do the audit. That was, I think, a corrupt thing. A minister called you and said, I have some contracts for you here. Come and tell us which one you want. He himself said that. He took one, got paid tons of money, millions of dollars. They did audits of NISIL, GFC, the Housing Fund. Almost every entity, 45 forensic audits they did. What was the result of it? What did they find? So that is just a fig leaf to divert attention from what they did. The fig leaf to divert attention. Nigel Hughes, if we did a forensic audit about his role in what role he had in influencing the 2016 agreement. The 2016 agreement. He resigned just before, as chairman of the party, AFC. He resigned just before the agreement started. But the negotiations had already started, and he resigned just before, as you got closer to the signing of the agreement. Isn't that a big conflict of interest? Not conflict of interest, is that maybe were there considerations for this? So that's their rhetoric all the time. They like lock up people, bully them, etc. The whole day they lock up somebody, lock up Jagdeo, lock up somebody else. If these are that's why I said we had the most corrupt government in that period. If you talk about systemic corruption, I just said earlier, Starbuck News will never editorialize on the missing 5 years of contracts on the APNU. Ask them to go and find a website where the contract is. Ask them to find a publication that audited every privatization transaction. I can give one to you tomorrow, then from the period 1992 to 2012. Every privatization transaction was audited and tabled in Parliament. Every public account, we produce public account record for every year from 1992 to the year we've been to this year. Before that, there was a gap of 10 years. Nothing, no public accounts. And so why don't they? And then, of course, 3 missing years of submission of Integrity Commission reports. How come he doesn't want a forensic audit of this? What happened in the first 3 years? Why didn't they want this? What was the base year? What did they accumulate in the base years? You should do a forensic audit of that. And I asked already that somebody should ask the question about in what circumstance, since Cathy, you said that there could be circumstances in which a minister could approve her own company contracts for our own company and payments for our own company. Let's hear that.
Finally, Dr. Jagdeo, at a town hall meeting in Canada, executive member of the PNC, Marvin Williams, would have made a claim that the government would have closed the Charles Rosa Nursing School.
Which?
The Charles Rosa Nursing School in Region 10. And the government is currently building one in Region 2, which those students would have to go to. Could you share your thoughts?
I don't think that's true. I think we are expanding the recruitment there. I spoke with Frank Anthony about it.
Yeah, indeed, it's not true, but I'm asking your thoughts on this kind of false narrative being spread in the diaspora.
But this is it. It's either racism. Look at even the development in Linden. The call center that I built there when I was president, we built here. Lens that we put in place and all of these things. Through the LEAF program, that is Linden Economic Advancement Program. they just distorted the whole thing, made it look like APNU did it. No housing development. And look, when we talk about the two facilities we're building, we're spending over $1 billion now in the Mackenzie and Bear Rock Stadium, where you can have one, you could have ICC lights in one, you can play ICC cricket. That's a $300 million lighting system that you have there, that you can play international cricket there. And by the way, the lighting thing was terrible. I didn't go there, but I heard about it, and I saw some memes saying that I caused the blackout. But the thing is that I found out what happened. So they told me that they have 3 of these lights that are powered from one 400 kilowatt generator and another 3 from another 400 kilowatt generator. And that the underground cable to that generator burnt, and it caused a feedback on the generator. So they had a hard time finding out what happened. The underground cable was burnt. And so this is what took place. But it's unfortunate that that happened. And it's very unfortunate that also the rain fell yesterday. It's very unfortunate. I didn't get to go, but I was very disappointed that the rain fell. I think we would have made the score yesterday. So coming back to lights, yes. So I was talking about Clinton, yeah. So I hope tomorrow we do well. These people have me like worried. So, Lyndon, you remember Norton? He was saying that, oh, we're building a cricket stadium in Lyndon, and we're doing it because somehow the PPP, that Lyndon plays football, and we're discriminating. Indian sport is cricket, you know. The dog whistle, we're building a cricket stadium. Well, ICC lights in the Mackenzie ground, you play cricket, and you can play football there too. You know, only cricket you can play football because those are brighter lights. And then the FIFA lights would be at the track, where we have an internationally certified track and a FIFA ground there too. So you can play football in both grounds, you can play cricket there. To everybody plays cricket. It's a national thing. People of every race, Norton, I don't know which era he is from. He thinks that maybe people in London don't want to play cricket. They don't like cricket. But it's this innate thing that it comes out spontaneously. Oh, they're going to put cricket lights there, but we play football. It's almost a reflexive racist thing. And the same thing on the railway embankment. Oh, the Indian villages, they're going to maybe do 2 lanes, and the Afro-Guyanese villages, they do 4. So they're not taking the vendors off the railway embankment in Indo-Guyanese dominated villages. Reflexive racism. And this guy, Marvin Williams, is no better. A failure. I think they are failure in government. I don't know what he did in the 5 years they were there, but I can tell you it was nothing much. But to go to Lyndon and lie. So again, Region 10, look, they're shutting down the nursing school here. When the fact is that we're actually going to train more people at the nursing school in Lyndon, but they're opening one in Region 2. Again, the dog whistle. Oh, Region 2, PPP, maybe more Indians live there. This is the racism that they push every single day. Not that the people of New Amsterdam now will get a new track. We're going to spend $800 million on that track and the lights there. for New Amsterdam, and it's under construction now. Or Linden, they have 2 stadiums. Or in Anna Regina or in Port Morant or anywhere else, they just are all the time focused on racism. Everywhere, it's a dog whistle. So I wouldn't be surprised that they did that. Notice when they go there, they would never be able to talk about policy. They can't talk about policy. Have you ever seen a APNU meeting where the focus is on policy? Or the AFC? They just, oh, we don't like what the PPP is doing. We had this idea to do this thing, etc. Nothing on policy. Yes.
Yes, my next question is pertaining to Suriname somewhat. You mentioned that you're happy for the Suriname agreement and you spoke with the minister, but can you say what's going on with our 150 fishing license from Suriname? Are we giving up on that? Are we still pursuing it?
It's utterly disgusting, and you know my views on that. The last time I said it, I got into, they were not very happy when I said what I had to say. I've not changed my opinion that that system is very opaque. Let me moderate what I said the last time. It's a very opaque system. And the Surinamese government has not been courageous enough to address it in a manner that would be consistent with good neighborliness. That's all I'd say this time. Okay, thank you.